what will they do to take over Taiwan? Will they go to war to take over Taiwan if they wanted to, or will they do other things? Well, they are doing other things. And will they succeed in taking over Taiwan?
Well, there are actually several questions buried in that, but I guess the one way to, you correct me if I miss your major point. One is that, of course, the Chinese are fond of saying, we don't go to war, right? Well, just on that situation, the Chinese Academy of Military Sciences, in Chinese on my wall bookshelf, it's called Chinese Strategy in War. And I think it was within the first 4 or 5 pages, it says China has fought more wars throughout its long history than any nation on earth. And the guy went into great detail. Now, what is a war, and all wars equal and so on? I don't want to get into it. But the notion that China, one of the sacred texts, so to speak, of Chinese literature is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Just like Machiavelli, The Prince. So I don't take the Chinese to be any worse in terms of being warlike, but I don't elevate them to some great moral superiority in the absence of war in their history. You can't understand what's happened in China without reference to internal war, just in the 20th century. So I don't take seriously when somebody thinks the closing argument is we don't believe in war and we don't go to war. Of course, the two wars of the Cold War, hot wars of the Cold War, were Vietnam and Korea. Tell it to my uncle that was in Korea that the Chinese don't go to war, right? So I don't. Now, secondly, you asked about Taiwan. Will they tank? Well, it certainly it depends. First of all, I don't know. And even if I would know, have a correct kind of inclination over the long run, there's still great uncertainty as to the timing. Also, there's the question of what do you actually mean by war? And that is what's called an escalation act ladder. Would the Chinese, first of all, just stop trading bilaterally? China is Taiwan's biggest export market. So if China just stops buying commodities that Taiwan, that I don't know if you want to call that war, but it's going to get Taiwan's attention, right? You could also throw an embargo. If you look at the map in I think it was the New York Times today, the edition, it has Taiwan ringed. And one of the possibilities is an embargo. And remember, the United States has never attacked a country directly with nuclear weapons. China's a nuclear state and building more weapons and more capable weapons. Will the U.S., now you say in the 1960s Cuban Missile Crisis, we set up a blockade and Russia turned back. But what would have happened if Russia or the Soviet Union had gone through? Well, so now if the Chinese set up a ring around Taiwan, will the U.S. break that blockade? Can't speak for the U.S. government, but strikes me as the Americans that say, hell yes. And then you've got two nuclear powers, cheek to jowl, and where does that go? The Chinese also have the option, don't attack Taiwan, but take offshore islands that are within sight of the China coast, Jinmen and Mazu, among two of the most likely. So the Chinese could show force by taking two, I don't want to say ruthless rocks, but let's say not enormously defensible or important. And then, of course, they could just full-on assault. But what if the Chinese learned from the Ukraine invasion? With modern weapons, smaller, weaker states can still inflict enormous casualties on Russia. Now, it remains to be seen what happens here, but I think everybody's been surprised by the capacity of relatively small Ukraine with modern weapons. And we've held back on what we've provided. And in fact, the U.S. is dumping in more weapons as fast as we can. And in some sense, we're torn between more weapons to Ukraine and more weapons to Taiwan. So what I'm saying is there's a big a lot of options before you get to Normandy invasion here. I hope we never start up that ladder, but somebody who says that involving Taiwan of some significant scale is impossible. I do not believe that. I think it has to be carefully managed, and quite frankly, in my personal view, we are being excessively provocative on Taiwan, because no Chinese leader can write Taiwan off and say, to get along with the Americans, let's cave on Taiwan. That is a non-starter. So you're trying to get me off stage.
No, Dr. Lampton, thank you for sharing your insights with us. Dr. Lampton's fascinating book is for sale in the back of the room, Living U.S.-China Relations. Thank you again.